Hi, I'm Ellen. My sister banned me from her wedding after I paid for almost everything, over $20,000. No warning, no explanation, just a text saying I wasn't welcome. But that wasn't the worst part. What hurt more was realizing it wasn't just about the wedding, it was the pattern. The years of quiet dismissal, of being useful but never visible. They used my name, my money, my kindness, and then erased me like I was never there. And when I finally said no, everything exploded. Why did they turn the whole family against me? And what did I do in return? The first text came just after 9 a.m. I was standing by the window, holding my coffee with one hand, absently stirring with the other. The November sky outside was heavy, gray, still, the kind of quiet that makes you brace for a storm, even if none ever comes. My phone buzzed on the counter. Kimbra. Hey, it might be best if you don't come to the wedding, for everyone's peace. At first, I thought maybe she sent it to the wrong person. I even blinked twice, like maybe that would make the words rearrange themselves into something less absurd. It didn't. I stared at the message for a long time. The longer I looked, the colder my skin felt, like the heat had drained from my hands, and then from the air itself. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I just stood there, coffee untouched, until it went lukewarm. It wasn't until I sat back down on the couch that it really hit me. That wasn't a suggestion. That was a disinvitation. My own sister, who I had helped plan every damn detail of this wedding, had decided I didn't belong at the table. I clicked open the wedding website. Months ago, Kimbra asked me to help her build it, because I understood layout better. She wanted something clean, elegant, tasteful, not cheap and desperate like those other brides, she'd said. I remembered her laughing when she said that. Laughing while I sat behind the screen putting it all together. I scrolled to the guest list. My name wasn't there, not even in the maybe section. I checked again. Maybe it was a mistake. It wasn't. I remembered paying the venue deposit back in spring, $3,500 wired from my account, because Mom said they didn't want to burden Kimbra during her creative project phase. I remembered paying for her third dress fitting, because the second one was a disaster and she deserved to feel beautiful. And the honeymoon suite? That was my doing too. She didn't know I upgraded it. I wanted her to have something memorable. Now, I wasn't even getting a seat in the back row. I sat there, unmoving, my eyes locked on the glowing screen. My own sister had erased me from her celebration like I was an editing error. And no one thought to check in. Not Mom, not Dad. Not even a generic, "This is awkward but let's talk" from Kimbra. Just silence. Like I'd never existed in the first place. My memory started rewinding, as if looking for answers in the archives. Every time she had thanked me, it came with a condition. "You're the best. Just don't post about it, okay?" Or, "Let's keep it between us. I want the family to think I pulled this off." I had played along because, well, I didn't need credit. I thought I was being supportive. But looking back now, it wasn't about humility. It was about control. She didn't want to share the stage, even in spirit. Kimbra didn't want me there because she had spent months rewriting the story where I didn't exist, just a quiet wallet in the background. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with something colder, firmer. Not rage. Not yet. Just understanding. I opened my banking app, scrolled past the usual stuff. There they were, all the payments related to her wedding. $3,500. The venue, $2,700. The dress fittings, $1,800. Florist initial deposit, $450. Hair and makeup trial. And those were just the ones I could remember. There were more, dozens of little things I'd agreed to pay for because we're family and this matters. Another buzz lit up my phone. Kimbra again. "I hope you understand. Let's not make this about money." That line pulled something loose inside me. Not anger, not the kind that makes you yell. This was the kind of anger that sat down, crossed its arms and started planning. I set my phone face down on the table. I could still feel it vibrating, one buzz after another. But I didn't flip it over. Instead, I got up, walked over to the cabinet, and pulled out my old notebook, the one I hadn't opened in years. I started writing, not a speech, not a message, a record of every dollar, every favor, every moment I'd said yes when I could have said no. Because if they were going to pretend I wasn't part of this, I was going to show them what it cost to erase me. Once I filled 2 full pages in that notebook, I closed it slowly, like sealing something dangerous back in its cage. The air in the room hadn't changed, but something in me had. I was done reacting. I needed to see the full picture now, not just the wound, but the knife. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table and curled up in the armchair by the window. The old radiator hissed quietly behind me, giving off just enough heat to fight the creeping cold. I opened Kimbra's wedding website again. I hadn't visited it in weeks, not since I helped set it up. I designed every section, the RSVP page, the custom banner, the navigation tabs. It had been our little secret, or so she'd said. Now I wasn't even sure she remembered I built it at all. I clicked on the bridal party section. The first photo was of Kimbra and her maid of honor, someone named Haley, a friend from some retreat she'd gone to during a business incubator program. They'd only known each other 2 years. But there she was, arms linked with Kimbra, captioned as, "My soul sister, my rock, the one who's been through everything with me." I scrolled, searching for something, anything, not even a special thanks to my family, not a whisper of my name. I wasn't a footnote. I was non-existent. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the rewrite, a careful, curated deletion, one that told me this wasn't an oversight. It was a pattern I hadn't wanted to see before. That same night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. I opened a folder from years ago, photos from a family trip to Savannah. I had booked the hotel, paid for gas, even brought the backup battery packs because Mom always forgot hers. At the time, I thought it was normal. Now I clicked through the pictures they posted afterward, the ones that ended up in Mom's digital photo frame. I wasn't in most of them. And the few I was in? I was blurry, cropped, or facing away from the camera. I remembered that slideshow Kimbra and Marva played at our cousin's baby shower. It was supposed to be a family memory reel. They narrated each photo, laughing, reminiscing. My name never came up. I had taken many of those pictures. I had funded most of the trip, but apparently I had only been there to press the shutter button. I felt my face tighten as I sat there in the dark, lit only by the soft blue of the screen. Maybe they didn't even notice. Maybe it was just easier for them to build their narrative without me in it. A few days later, I attended Kimbra's bridal shower. I hadn't planned to go, but Marva insisted. She said, "Just show your face. It's important to be supportive, even if you're not front and center." I stood in the back while Kimbra made her speech. Her voice rang through the boutique tea shop they'd rented for the event. Charming but refined, she called it. I remember that because it was the same phrase I used months ago when helping her draft her theme. She stood there, a crystal flute in hand, and said, "I couldn't have done this without my mom. Every detail, every dream, I owe to her. She's made it all possible." I didn't flinch, not visibly, but inside, I could feel something press hard behind my ribs. She looked right past me. No mention of the fact that I handled all her vendor contracts. No mention that I floated her first 3 dress appointments. Nothing, just, "Thanks, Mom." I thought about raising my hand. Not to interrupt, but maybe just to remind her. Maybe a subtle joke like, "And who set up the RSVP system again?" But I stayed quiet, because silence had become my place. Not asked for, but assigned. Back home, later that night, I sat in bed with my notes app open. I wrote one sentence. I wasn't invisible, I was edited out. I read it twice before locking the phone and setting it down. The truth of it felt heavier than any insult I'd ever been handed, because it wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being removed. It wasn't just this wedding. It was the last 10 years. Every birthday where I took the photo instead of being in it. Every holiday meal where I handled dishes while they posed for family shots. Every time Mom praised Kimbra's resilience while I was working overtime to cover her bounce checks. I used to think that's just how families worked. Now I realized that's just how they worked me. I stood up and walked to my small printer tucked beneath my desk. The light blinked as it warmed up. I scrolled through each email, invoice, PayPal receipt, and text screenshot I'd archived. One by one, I hit print. These weren't just receipts anymore. They were proof that I existed, proof that I gave, over and over, without asking for applause. And now, I wasn't asking anymore. I stacked the printed receipts on my dining table, each page still warm from the printer. Watching the pile grow gave me a strange sense of calm, like I was building something solid for the first time in months. Something that couldn't be rewritten or ignored. Something that said, I was here. It was mid-morning when I finally stepped away from the table to pour myself a fresh cup of coffee. That's when my phone lit up again, this time with a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. Hi, this is Justine from the Palmetto Gardens in Charleston. We're finalizing the extended guest count for the Langley Hunter wedding. Since the reservation is still under your name, we just need confirmation by noon today. Thanks. My name. I grabbed my laptop again, heart starting to pick up. I pulled up my email and searched Palmetto Gardens. Dozens of threads popped up, some CC'd to Kimbra, others to vendors I didn't even recognize. I opened the most recent one. The reservation was active, and my full name and contact details were front and center. Ellen L. Grant, primary signatory. I hadn't spoken to that venue since February, when I first paid the deposit. Back then, it was just a placeholder, something I agreed to put under my name until Kimbra figured out her credit limit situation. Apparently, she decided to never figure it out. I clicked into the florist's confirmation next. Same story. Then the catering company. Same. The entertainment booking. Same. Everything was under me. My stomach turned, not from fear, but from the sick feeling of being taken for a fool. Scrolling further, I found a scanned PDF labeled Langley Wedding Catering Form. I opened it. It had my digital signature, my initials, even the same style of date stamp I used on work documents. Only, I hadn't signed it. I'd never even seen this form. Whoever had forged it knew just enough to make it look real. They'd copied my signature from another document, I could tell. The slant was too perfect, the spacing too precise. I closed my laptop and stepped outside for air. The street was quiet, save for a few distant leaf blowers and the dull hum of a neighbor's mower. I walked slowly down the block, thinking back to how many times I'd heard, "You're so good with details," or "It's just easier if you handle it." No one ever said, "Thank you." They just expected. Back inside, I sat down at the table and texted Trula. "Did you get that email from Kimbra's planner? The one she copied you on by mistake?" A few minutes passed before she replied. "Yeah. Weird part is, there's an email from you on it." My fingers froze. "What do you mean from me?" Trula screenshotted it and sent it over. Subject: "All good now, thanks." Body: "Hi, this is Ellen. I just want to clarify that everything is fine now. Please go ahead with all planned arrangements." I never wrote that. The email address was close to mine, but not exact. An extra letter thrown in, one most people wouldn't notice. Someone, likely Kimbra or Mom, had created a fake account, sent a message pretending to be me, and forwarded it to a vendor to keep everything moving. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, but not with panic. With clarity. This wasn't just manipulation. This was impersonation, fraud even. And they expected me to stay silent, to keep being the good one, the invisible pillar holding everything up while they smiled for the camera. I opened a blank page on my laptop and started listing every vendor involved. Venue, catering, photographer, florist, DJ. One by one, I pulled the invoices, cross-checked the totals, and attached screenshots. No rage, no tears, just the meticulous work of someone who'd had enough. Then, I drafted an email, not to anyone else, but to myself. Subject: Termination of responsibility, Charleston wedding event. Message: Effective immediately. I am no longer liable for services I did not authorize or contracts I did not sign. All vendor arrangements made using my identity without direct consent are considered null from my end. Any charges incurred moving forward are not my responsibility. I saved it in a secure folder. Tomorrow, I'd take the next step. Not out of spite, but because it was time. They'd used my name freely, carelessly. If they wanted to pretend I didn't matter, they'd soon understand the cost of that fantasy. The next morning came without ceremony. The air in my apartment felt unusually still, like even the walls were holding their breath. I had slept, but not restfully, just enough to keep going. By 8:30, I was at my desk, the wedding venue portal already loaded on the screen. I stared at the reservation summary. There it was, my name at the top, still listed as the primary contact. Still the one responsible for every penny. A bright yellow button at the bottom blinked, "Cancel reservation." I hovered over it for just a second. No flashbacks, no doubt. I clicked. A message popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this event? Non-refundable deposit will be forfeited." I hit confirm. The screen flashed. A confirmation number appeared. And that was that. $6,000. Gone. Not refunded, not credited. Gone. I knew what that meant for them. I also knew it wasn't my mess to fix anymore. I leaned back, my chair letting out a soft creak, and closed the tab. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt final. Within the next hour, I moved on to the rest. I drafted a quick message to the photographer. "Please remove any shared files or previews tied to the Langley Hunter event. My contract is voided, and I will not be responsible for any remaining balance." Then the honeymoon resort. I am not the guest of record. The booking was processed with my details without full authorization. Cancel immediately. Next, the florist. Please do not proceed with any further arrangements or deliveries for the Langley Hunter wedding. Orders were placed under my name, but without proper consent. Cancel and confirm termination of service. Every email ended the same way. No services were authorized with my full consent. Short, direct. Enough to hold up in court, if it came to that. By noon, it was done. All of it. My inbox quieted. For the first time in weeks, there were no pending contracts or vendor messages blinking red. I felt something shift, not relief, release. Around 2, my phone started buzzing. "Mom!" lit up the screen. I let it ring, no hesitation. It rang again. Then came the text. "Did you really cancel the venue? Kimbra is losing her mind. Call me, now." I read it, set the phone face down on the table, and walked into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, sipped slowly, then returned to the couch. My journal was still where I left it the night before. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "They gave me silence for years. I'm just giving it back." The words felt heavier than they looked, but they were true. My family had always found comfort in pretending my help came with no boundaries, no voice, no conditions. I had finally introduced one. That evening, as the sun began to set behind the pine trees outside my window, I opened a new document, Financial Disengagement Statement. I listed every item, venue, florist, catering, travel accommodations, next to dates and amounts. Then, I added timestamps of text confirmations and screenshots of payment receipts. The total was sobering, even to me. At the bottom, I wrote in bold, "Effective immediately, I withdraw all financial responsibility tied to the Langley Hunter wedding. Any ongoing obligations or unresolved balances must be redirected to the responsible parties." I printed 2 copies. One went into my personal file drawer. The other I sealed in an envelope, blank on the front. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. Mail it, hand it over in person, maybe even shred it. But for now, it was a symbol. A symbol that I was no longer the one holding everything up. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed as dusk gave way to full dark, the room glowing softly from a single lamp. My hands were still, my heart beat even. There were no tears, no fury, only certainty. I didn't need to scream to be heard. And I didn't owe them the courtesy of warning shots. The next morning, I didn't wake up to the sound of birds or an alarm. I woke up to a flood of notifications lighting up my phone like a broken faucet. Text after text, voicemail after voicemail, all demanding something from me. I didn't check them right away. I sat there in bed, blanket pulled halfway up my chest, letting the vibration echo across the nightstand. It felt like the universe was vibrating too. Eventually, I reached for the phone and tapped on the first voicemail. It was from Marva. Her voice was sharp, like it had been rehearsed. "Do you realize what you've done? Kimbra's in tears. She hasn't stopped shaking since last night. She said the venue pulled out, the florist, the planner's threatening to quit. What were you thinking, Ellen?" Not once did she ask if I was okay. Not once did she even pretend to wonder how I got to this point. I closed the message and moved on to the next. It was from Aunt Lisa. "That was a low blow, Ellen. You blindsided your sister during the most important week of her life." Then Uncle Ron chimed in. "You couldn't let her have this one moment? Just one?" And then the text messages. "That was cruel. You made your point. Happy now? I used to think better of you." There it was, the family consensus. Ellen the villain. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed air. I made coffee. Black, no sugar. Something grounding. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened the family group chat, the one we only used for holiday coordination and baby pictures. It had become a war zone overnight. Someone had posted screenshots of the canceled vendor emails, the venue cancellation. A cousin I barely spoke to added a passive-aggressive emoji reaction. Kimbra hadn't written anything directly, but she didn't have to. Her friends did it for her. One message stood out, from my mother's older brother, a man who once told me I was the steady one. "Your sister's wedding was your chance to show up for this family, but you chose to make it about yourself." That was the one that broke the silence. I typed back. "I did show up, with $20,000, and not one seat in return. No emojis, no qualifiers, just the truth." The message stayed there for a minute. Then it was followed by more noise, the kind that doesn't ask for understanding, only obedience. I muted the thread. Trula texted not long after. "Heard the chat exploded. I'm proud of you." That stopped me for a second. She and I met in college. She once said I had middle child energy, even though I was the youngest. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "You're the kind that makes sure everyone gets a slice before taking one yourself." I remembered the night she got a notice for overdue rent. I paid it, no questions. She cried. I told her to just keep going. She never forgot that. "You've always held people up," her text continued. "They're just mad now that you let go." It was strange how one person could say 10 words and make you feel like you hadn't lost everything after all. I texted her back a simple thanks. That night, I didn't do much. I heated up a can of lentil soup, sliced up some crackers, and let soft jazz fill the silence in my apartment. No news, no social media, no updates from the people suddenly so invested in my moral standing. I sat with my dinner, warm spoon in hand, and just listened. To the music, to the quiet, to my own thoughts. They think silence is surrender. They don't realize it's armor. People like Marva and Kimbra operate best in performance mode. Everything is curated. Public applause, picture-perfect moments, the illusion of unity. But they don't know what to do when the audience stops clapping. When someone walks off stage, refuses the role, and says, "I'm done playing this character." They expected me to keep feeding the machine, quietly, forever. But I was done. By 9 p.m., I turned my phone off entirely. Not airplane mode, Off. I didn't need another notification, another ping of someone trying to be the bigger person, just long enough to shame me back into line. I brushed my teeth, changed into flannel pajamas, and sat at the edge of my bed, same as I had the night before. The envelope I'd sealed still sat on the dresser, untouched. My chest felt lighter, not because the storm was over, but because I had finally stopped trying to calm it. Let them tell their version. I was done auditioning for a seat in someone else's story. By morning, the sky outside had softened from black to a muted blue, like the world was trying to reset itself. I moved quietly through my apartment, making coffee and opening the blinds just wide enough to let the light in, but not so wide that it felt like an invitation. I didn't need the day's judgment. I just needed time. I turned on my laptop and clicked into a clean folder I created the night before. I named it exactly what it was: Wedding Liabilities, Kimbra, Marva. No sugarcoating, no euphemisms, just facts. The first thing I added was the PDF of my financial disengagement letter. Then came the screenshots, bank transfers, confirmation emails, contracts, and the forged digital signature from the catering company. I wasn't building a case out of spite. I was archiving truth. I included the fake email too, the one supposedly from me that reassured vendors everything was fine. The subtle typo in the Gmail address, the casual tone that didn't sound like me at all, it was all there. By the time I finished, the folder had over 40 documents. I created a cover page that read, Statement of Misuse. Summary of unauthorized use of financial identity. It felt sterile, legal, necessary. I uploaded the entire folder to an encrypted drive and sent it to Dara Sloan, a lawyer I had worked with once before during a property dispute years back. She wasn't flashy, she didn't posture, she just got things done. Within an hour, she replied, "Got it, sit tight, I'll draft the formal letter." While I waited, I walked 2 blocks down to the mailbox and dropped in a few bills. The crisp cold felt good on my skin. It reminded me I was here, not some invisible assistant behind the scenes of someone else's life. Back home, I refreshed my inbox. Subject line: Unlawful misrepresentation and unauthorized financial commitment. It was bold, black, and perfectly worded. Dara had addressed it to both Kimbra and Marva. In 3 succinct pages, she outlined the extent of the misrepresentation, demanded a written acknowledgement of misuse, and provided 30 days to return the total misappropriated funds. The final paragraph made me sit up straighter. Failure to respond within the stated period will result in immediate escalation through formal legal channels. I exhaled slowly. I wasn't scared. I was steady. I forwarded the letter to my personal email, added it to the evidence folder, and backed it up to 2 separate drives. Later that afternoon, as I sat reading by the window, a push notification from Instagram flashed across my phone. Kimbra had posted a new story, a grainy black and white photo of her looking out a window, the caption reading, "Some people would rather burn everything than be happy for others." I rolled my eyes. Classic. She didn't tag me, of course. That would require her to admit publicly that this had anything to do with me. No, this was the kind of passive-aggressive performance she was so good at, just enough for her followers to offer pity, just vague enough to deny when confronted. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I opened a new email and typed, "Hi, please remove my name and contact information from all current communications regarding the Langley Hunter event. Legal notice attached." I sent it directly to the wedding planner, CC'd Dara, and attached the cease and desist. There was no satisfaction in the click, just confirmation that a boundary had finally been drawn. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marva. Not a call. An email. Subject: Talk? The message was short. "Can we handle this without all the paperwork? You're blowing this way out of proportion. Let's be reasonable." Reasonable. I read the message twice, the second time slower. I didn't reply. Instead, I saved the email as a PDF and added it to the folder. Because when someone calls your silence convenient and your boundaries dramatic, they're not asking for peace. They're asking for permission to keep exploiting you. I closed my laptop, walked into the kitchen, and filled a glass with water. The sun was already low, casting long golden lines across the countertop. I stood there for a minute, just breathing. They wanted a quiet servant. What they got was a silent record keeper. They built their story on assumptions, pity, and polished facades. I built mine with receipts. The kettle's whistle faded into the quiet of the kitchen as I carried my tea back to the desk. The last orange thread of sunlight had slipped below the ridgeline, leaving the apartment steeped in calm. A different kind of calm than before, one that wasn't tentative or waiting. I was no longer anticipating a response. I was simply preparing for what would come. And what came next didn't arrive by text or call, it came by mail. A plain envelope, forwarded from my old address in Columbia, sat on top of the pile of circulars and junk flyers. No stamp. Courier delivered. The sender, Palmetto State Financial Services. I tore it open, not hurriedly, just curious. Inside was a formal letter, dense with legal jargon, but the heart of it was clear enough. Preliminary investigation of fraudulent use of identity for financial gain. The language was clinical, pending claim, discrepancy, responsible party under inquiry. My name appeared 4 times. So did the word triggered, as in triggered by submitted documentation from a third-party legal counsel. Dara's file had done its job. I hadn't asked for this part, but I didn't stop it either. A quiet breath left my chest. I placed the letter in a drawer without flinching. About 30 minutes later, I got the notification. Kimbra had gone live. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made dinner, stir-fried vegetables and rice, and ate standing at the counter. I told myself I wouldn't watch it. I lied. It took 2 minutes to find the reposted version. A grainy, vertical video, her face streaked with tears, makeup smudged like a watercolor gone wrong. "My own sister wants to ruin my wedding week," she said into the camera, her voice shaking. "This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. I can't even trust my own family. I don't even know what I did." She sniffled dramatically. The comments rolled in faster than the captions could keep up. "Stay strong, girl. Family can be so fake. Cut the toxic ones, even if it's blood." Wow, the jealousy is real. I closed the app before it finished. Not because I couldn't stomach it, but because I could. There was nothing surprising about it. Not the performative pain, not the exaggerated framing, not even the silence that followed from my family. Except one voice. My father's. I hadn't heard it in 6 months. After seeing the live video, something in me stirred. Not rage, not even hope. Just a need to hear from someone who was supposed to care. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Ellen?" His voice was cautious, like I was a stranger calling with bad news. "I just need 5 minutes," I said. And I gave him everything. No dramatics, no raised voice. Just the facts. The forged signature, the stolen identity, the fake email account. I even mentioned the investigation letter. He was silent through it all. When I finished, the pause was long. I could hear his breath on the line. Then came the sentence. "You know how your sister is. Why would you let this get so far?" It wasn't anger I felt then. It wasn't even disappointment. It was confirmation. I said nothing else, just hung up. I didn't need to defend my version of events anymore. If he still couldn't see it, if he chose not to see it, then there was nothing left to discuss. I took off my earrings, set my phone to Do Not Disturb, and sat on the floor beside my coffee table. My breath came slow and deep. There's a peculiar clarity that comes with total abandonment. A clean break. No more maybes. No more negotiations. Later that night, I opened Instagram one last time. My name was tagged in a dozen stories. Some I recognized from mutuals. Others were complete strangers dissecting my life like a podcast episode. I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to know what version of me they'd pieced together from fragments Kimbra had fed them. I scrolled for a second, then tapped Delete App. Not uninstall, not hide, delete. I placed the phone face down and made tea. Chamomile this time. No sugar. While it steeped, I thought about all the roles I'd played in their narrative. The helper, the provider, the buffer, the problem solver, the silent backup plan, and now, the villain. If their story required me to be the scapegoat, fine. Let them keep the role. I just wouldn't be there to perform it. They could throw their tantrums, post their videos, beg their followers for sympathy. But I wouldn't be participating. My name might be dragged through the mud, but my dignity wasn't going with it. I wrapped myself in a blanket, turned off the kitchen light, and sank into the quiet of my living room. My silence was never weakness. It was survival. In a house where truth wasn't welcome, it was the only armor I ever had. That night, I slept soundly. Not because everything was okay, but because I had finally stopped waiting for things to be. The next morning brought no surprises, no apology, no sudden realization, just the stillness of a life that had shed its noise. I was pouring coffee into a chipped mug when Trula's name flashed on my screen. She rarely called this early, unless it was serious. I answered, bracing for something I couldn't name yet. "I need to send you something," she said, skipping the greeting. Within seconds, my phone pinged again. A voice memo, 3 minutes long. "It's from the brunch," she added. "Mom left her phone recording by accident. She was sitting next to your aunt. I thought you should hear it." I plugged in my earbuds and pressed play. Marva's voice came through clearly, too clearly. "Let's just get through this wedding. Ellen's never been the warm one. This isn't her world. She's always been intense." A pause. Some silverware clinking in the background. Then another voice. My aunt, unmistakable with her nasal tone. "She's not even part of this family anymore." "Not really." That was all I needed. I didn't replay it. Once was enough. I placed the phone face down, took a long sip of coffee, and stared out the window. It was overcast again, clouds hanging like questions no one intended to answer. Back at my desk, I logged into my bank account. There was a line of automatic payments scheduled for the next 2 weeks. Marva's health insurance, the co-signed phone bill, Harlan's old SUV registration renewal, an annual dental plan I'd paid into for emergencies. I began canceling them, one at a time. Click, confirm, remove. Each confirmation screen gave me something that words never could. Relief. The last thing I did was log into the DMV site and submit a request to remove my name from the title of the car Harlan drove. He hadn't made a payment in months, and I'd covered the difference without complaint. Not anymore. Once everything was handled, I typed a new letter. Subject: Notice of financial disengagement. Permanent. It was short, precise, final. I printed the document, folded it carefully, and slid it into the same envelope that had been sitting untouched on my dresser for weeks. This time, I wrote 2 words on the front. Not for return. By late afternoon, I opened my freezer, pulled out a meal I'd prepped last weekend, and let it thaw while I grabbed my phone again. I drafted a message to Marva. "I listened to what you said. It was enough." I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over the blue send arrow. But I didn't tap it. I tapped back. Then I deleted the message entirely. Instead, I opened my calendar and booked a cabin in the mountains for the coming weekend. 2 nights. No cell reception. Just trees, silence, and space. It wasn't an escape. It was a beginning. Sometimes healing doesn't look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like closing a door so softly no one even hears it. That evening, a weather alert blinked across the bottom of my screen. Arctic cold front approaching. Temperatures expected in the teens. I paused. I remembered how 2 winters ago, I'd sent money for heating oil to keep the old house warm. Harlan had called me in the middle of the night, voice shaking, saying the thermostat had stopped working and Marva was too proud to ask for help. I'd wired the money within 20 minutes. This year, no call, no request, just silence. I didn't send anything, I didn't need to make a statement. I didn't need them to feel punished. But I also didn't need to continue pretending I was still responsible for their comfort. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapped in a thick knit blanket, and wrote a single sentence in my journal. You don't get to warm a home with silence and take credit for the fire. Outside, the wind began to pick up. I could hear it in the eaves, brushing against the windows like a reminder of all the things I no longer had to carry. I didn't shut the door on them. I just stopped holding it open. By the following Friday, the wind had turned sharper. I took it as a sign. I didn't leave a note. I didn't announce my departure with a text, a post, or even a quiet mention to my neighbors. I just loaded the last box into the back of a rented U-Haul and slid the latch shut. The apartment I had lived in for 5 years, my first home after leaving Columbia, was bare. Empty shelves, echoing footsteps. Only the faint ring on the floor where the coffee table used to sit hinted that I'd ever been there. The new place was in Colorado Springs, a town I had never visited, in a rental I hadn't toured. I didn't need familiar this time. I needed space, distance, and more than anything, I needed to go without asking if it was okay. Leaving wasn't about anger. It wasn't about getting back at anyone. It was about reclaiming the silence they once used against me and reshaping it into something healing. I didn't give a forwarding address. No change of address card filed. The only thing I left behind was the key, resting in the middle of the kitchen counter, like a final punctuation mark. On the drive out of Asheville, I kept the radio low. No music, no podcast. Just the hum of the road beneath me and the occasional sound of my own breathing. Slow, steady, sure. Halfway through Tennessee, I got a text from Hannah, a friend from my old job. Your sister's wedding post disappeared. No explanation, no caption, just gone. I didn't ask why. I didn't go looking for screenshots. The story she built had finally collapsed under the weight of its own fiction, and I no longer needed to see it fall. Marva's number was already blocked, but later that night, as I sat cross-legged on the floor of my new living room, still full of boxes, still smelling like primer, I noticed a new email. No subject. The sender? Harlan. The message read only, "Hope you're okay. Mom hasn't been well." That was it. I read it once, maybe twice, then moved it to trash. There was no anger in the action, only the understanding that some bridges aren't meant to be crossed again. Some are meant to burn, quietly, steadily, until nothing remains but the truth. The next morning, I set up the essentials: a desk near the window, a bookshelf with a few of my favorite titles, a potted jade plant I picked up at a market on the way in. I began volunteering at a small library near downtown. 3 mornings a week. No one asked about my past. They just handed me a shelf to organize and thanked me when I was done. It was enough. One night, while journaling in bed, I wrote, "I don't want to be remembered as the one who gave up. I want to be known as the one who chose herself." And I meant it. That weekend, after unpacking the last box, I sat down with a blank piece of stationery and wrote a letter I never intended to send. To my family, you taught me to be silent, and I mastered it. You taught me to endure, and I perfected it. But you never taught me how to leave. That part I taught myself. I folded the letter neatly, walked outside, and placed it into the fire pit behind the rental. With one flick of a lighter, the page caught flame. The edges curled inward, like dried leaves in October, the ink turning to smoke and sky. As I watched it disappear, I didn't feel triumph. I felt weightless. The past didn't vanish with the ashes, but it no longer held the pen. I did. That evening, I made a simple dinner: roasted vegetables, jasmine rice, and a quiet glass of wine. I ate on the porch as the sun melted behind the Rockies. There was no applause, no reconciliation, just the slow rhythm of peace coming in like a tide I hadn't realized I'd been waiting on. Sometimes peace doesn't come with forgiveness. Sometimes it walks in quietly after the last goodbye. Before I go, I want to leave you with something. Not just a story, but a truth I had to learn the hard way. Sometimes family isn't where you come from. It's what you choose to protect. And when you're constantly the one keeping the peace, paying the bills, holding your tongue, you're not building a home, you're being buried in it. Walking away wasn't about bitterness. It was about choosing to no longer be complicit in a version of love that demanded my silence and called it loyalty. I don't share this story because I think I'm special. I share it because too many of us, especially women, caregivers, the dependables, have been told our value is in what we endure. That's a lie. Your worth is not measured by how much mistreatment you can survive. It's measured by the boundaries you're brave enough to draw and keep. So I ask you, have you ever been erased in a space where you were the one holding it together? Have you ever let go, not in defeat, but in clarity? I'd love to hear what you've learned from that. Or, if you're still in the middle of it, what you're holding on to. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment with one, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, tell me why. I read every comment. Let's talk about it. If this story touched your heart, inspired your boundaries, or simply reminded you that you're not alone, hit subscribe. That way, you won't miss the next story. We have so many more voices to hear, and your presence here makes all the difference. Until next time, take care of yourself, loudly.
Hi, I'm Lorene. At a family party, my sister laughed and called me too poor for dessert. They sat me near the restroom. My name wasn't even on the place card, but what they didn't know was that I owned the property they were all clapping about. It wasn't the first time they tried to write me out, but this time, I brought receipts. Why do the people closest to us rewrite our stories until we stop letting them? It was supposed to be a celebration. At least, that's how Mom pitched it. Just a nice family dinner, she said over the phone, her voice all sunshine and silk, like we hadn't spent the last decade pretending I was some awkward cousin instead of her youngest daughter. I knew better than to expect warmth, but I didn't expect the napkin. The hostess guided me past the main table, past the polished oak center spread with white hydrangeas and linen napkins, until we reached a small side table tucked near the hallway to the restrooms, and there it was. A single place setting. A paper napkin with my name scratched in blue ink. Everyone else had elegant printed place cards. "You sure this is mine?" I asked, trying not to let my voice crack. "Oh yes," she smiled politely. "Mrs. Hale said this was correct." She turned on her heel before I could answer. I sat down, slowly, adjusting the hem of my dress, already regretting the effort I made. Across the room, Kelly sparkled like a Macy's mannequin, tailored suit, teeth too white, laughter just a little too loud. She waved at someone near the bar, then caught my eye for a split second and turned away like she hadn't seen me. Of course she saw me. As more family members filtered in, the air thickened with the clinking of glasses, the scrape of chairs, and that familiar undercurrent of competition. Real estate wins, Ivy League internships, retirement plans. So luxurious it's almost embarrassing. Everyone had a polished story. I had a paper napkin. The server brought bread. I reached for a slice and overheard Kelly say to Uncle Richard, "Oh, we're still waiting on Lorene. She's probably budgeting parking." He chuckled like it was nothing. That was the thing about Kelly. She knew how to draw blood without making it look like a wound. When the appetizers arrived, I made myself small. Shrimp cocktail, caprese skewers, goat cheese something, I barely touched them. I focused on breathing, staying upright, keeping the quiet in. "Have you been working lately?" my cousin Mara asked. I nodded. "What do you do again?" she added. Her fork paused midair like the answer wasn't worth finishing a bite for. "I'm in property development," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Oh," she blinked. "So like, managing units?" "Something like that." Kelly, 3 chairs away, but always listening, chimed in. "She's being modest. Lorene shows the cutest rent-controlled studios, perfect for starving students." I kept my hands folded in my lap. Dinner came and went. They talked about renovations and hedge funds and trust structures like I didn't exist. I sipped my water and waited for the part where I could leave without looking dramatic. Then the server came by with the dessert menu. Kelly leaned in dramatically, waved it away from our side of the table, and said to the waiter, loud enough for all to hear, "We'll skip dessert on this end. Budget season, right, sis?" Laughter burst like static. Uncle Richard barked. Aunt Susan gave that tight little shake of her head. Even Mom smiled, Small, embarrassed, but still there. I stared at the untouched tiramisu across the table. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I was already full of humiliation. Somehow, I managed to stay seated. The fork in my hand suddenly felt like lead. My eyes burned but didn't betray me. Not here. Not for them. I took one last sip of water, then placed my napkin, my makeshift name card, beside my empty plate. "I'm good," I said to the server when she circled back. "I've had enough for tonight." But I wasn't talking about dessert anymore, as they launched into a toast about Kelly's latest donation to some coastal preservation gala. I let my gaze drift, just for a second. Candlelight shimmered off her diamond earrings, catching the angles of a woman who had everything she ever wanted and nothing she didn't take. I thought about high school. Kelly at the center of her sweet 16, me in a borrowed dress that didn't quite zip up. I remembered her voice as clearly as if it had been yesterday. "She's modest or broke?" And the way people laughed then, too. Except now, I wasn't 15, and I wasn't broke. But they didn't know that, not yet. I pushed back my chair with a soft scrape. "I'll see you all soon," I murmured. No one looked up. Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked to my car without checking my reflection. No one follows a woman like me out of a room like that. Not when they've decided she doesn't belong. But I wasn't chasing a seat at their table anymore. I was building my own. After I pulled out of the parking lot, I didn't drive straight home. I found a 24-hour gas station, parked beneath a flickering light, and sat with the engine running. I don't know why. Maybe to let the weight of the night settle somewhere besides my chest. Maybe to remind myself I still had the keys to more than just my car. The following evening, I got a text from Mara. "Mom's dinner was great. Hope you're coming to Saturday's gathering. Kelly's got a surprise planned for Kate." A smiley face followed. I stared at the screen for a while before tossing the phone on the couch. My appetite hadn't come back, but my memory had. By the time Saturday rolled around, I'd resolved to show up. Not to smile, not to forget, just to watch. It was held at Kelly's house this time. Her backyard patio was strung with market lights, glowing warm against the early spring dusk. Someone handed me a glass of champagne, and I nodded politely, finding my way to the edge of the crowd. I scanned for my mother. She was there, of course, seated front and center, as always, draped in a pastel shawl, like she was waiting for a portrait artist to arrive. Kelly stood beside her, one hand resting theatrically on her shoulder. "Before dessert," she said, raising her voice just enough, "we have a little something for our wonderful mother." The crowd hushed with rehearsed anticipation. Kelly gestured, and Daniel, her husband, stepped forward holding a silver gift bag. Inside was a beautifully framed document, a deed. The deed to a slice of Oregon woodland near the coast, a patch of green my mother had visited every year since I was 10. She called it her retreat for the soul. Applause erupted. Someone said, "How thoughtful," and another followed. Only Kelly would remember such a thing. As people leaned in to read the gift tag, I already knew what it would say. From Kelly, Daniel, and the Hale family. Not a mention of me, even though the purchase had been mine. Quietly, months ago. I had found the land, negotiated the price, filed the paperwork, paid for it in full, and instructed the seller to gift wrap the deed and send it through Kelly at my mother's request. Kelly hadn't added a cent, but she had removed something. My name. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just took another sip of champagne, which suddenly tasted like ash. Later, as the guests moved toward the buffet, Kelly motioned me over to introduce me to a few of Daniel's relatives from Bend. "This is my baby sister, Lorene," she said with the same smile you'd give a stray cat before putting it back outside. "She's still figuring out her path, one of the freest spirits I know." They chuckled gently, like they were in on some private joke. An older woman said, "It's good to have a dreamer in every family. Keeps the rest of us grounded." I nodded. "Sure does." The laughter faded into background noise. No one asked me what I did. No one asked me anything at all. Conversations swirled around foundation endowments, a cousin's winery expansion, someone's vacation home in Big Sur. Every time I opened my mouth, someone else spoke louder. It wasn't personal. That was the problem. I was used to it. Being spoken over, being described instead of being heard. It didn't hurt like it used to. It burned differently now, like a match being held too long. I excused myself halfway through dessert and stepped inside the house. I needed a moment to breathe, to stop clenching my teeth. In the hallway, I passed a shelf filled with family photos. Every frame showcased Kelly, at her graduation, her wedding, next to our mother in matching blazers at some benefit gala. My face appeared twice, once as a toddler on a tricycle, once blurry in the background of a Thanksgiving shot from 10 years ago. A ghost in my own lineage. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't take the frame and smash it, though I thought about it. Instead, I went home. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat at the dining table. I opened the locked drawer and pulled out the manila folder labeled Pine Hollow Transfer of Ownership. My signature was crisp. My account number was clear. The final payment receipt, stapled neatly behind the deed, bore the date and wire ID. My initials were in the bottom corner. My name was there when it mattered, I whispered. They just didn't want it seen. I turned on the lamp, adjusted the angle of the chair, and began to highlight dates. I opened my laptop, scanned copies into a backup folder, and labeled each document precisely. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about keeping the record straight. Because stories, once told often enough without interruption, become truth. And I wasn't about to let them write mine out again. I didn't call anyone that night, didn't post a cryptic quote on social media. I simply worked, quietly, methodically, like a woman planting seeds. Let them toast to themselves, let them erase me from gift tags and table seats. They had no idea what I was preserving. Morning came slow, gray, and damp like most mornings in Portland. I stood at my kitchen counter, stirring instant oatmeal, staring through the steam at the blinking cursor on my laptop. Beside it, the folder lay open where I'd left it the night before. Highlighted lines, marked pages, a story no one knew but everyone had benefited from. As the oatmeal thickened, I pulled out an old shoebox from the hall closet. One that still had tape from 3 moves ago. It held old photos, scribbled notes from college, and a few folded pieces of paper I hadn't touched in years. At the bottom was what I was looking for. A copy of the graduation speech I'd written when I was 21. I had been selected as the student speaker, something only 2 people in our department ever remembered each year. My professors were thrilled. I was proud. But I never gave that speech. The same week, Kelly announced her engagement. My mother called me the night before the ceremony. You're going to talk about your life, your goals, all those things you've worked for, and I'm proud of you, baby. But this weekend is about your sister. She's waited so long for this moment. Don't take the light off her. I hadn't even fought it. I told the dean I was sick. Sat in the audience in a dull blue dress while someone else read their mediocre essay about campus nostalgia. My mother had applauded, loudly. And Kelly, she'd kissed her fiancé and said, "See? Everything works out when we support each other." The oatmeal was cold by then. I dropped the spoon in the sink and went to my desk. I opened the document labeled Woodland Deed Timeline and began typing. Monday, site scouting. Wednesday, broker contact, price negotiation. Following week, full payment wire, filed under my name, gifted through Kelly, per request. Each line was simple, just facts. But with each one, the tightness in my chest loosened a notch. Around 11 a.m., my phone rang. I didn't check the screen. Only one person still called without texting first. "Hey, sweet pea," my mother chirped when I answered. "Hi," I said, not bothering to sit. "Kelly told me you were at the dinner. I'm glad. It meant so much to her. And to me." I said nothing. "She's getting a lot of press for that woodland thing. Isn't it amazing what she's doing for the environment? And for my birthday, no less." I could practically hear the pearls clinking against her neck when she laughed. It wasn't a harsh sound. My mother's voice never was. That's what made it so effective. "You know how she gets, Lorene," she added lightly. "Don't stir things. You've always been stronger." There was a long pause. "She didn't mean anything by forgetting your name. Let her have her moment, okay? Don't hurt your sister." My fingers were tight around the phone. I had to remind myself to breathe through my nose. "She erased me, Mom," I said slowly. That wasn't an accident. A small sigh. You girls are both so different, and you've always had such strong feelings. But this is her path, her light. There's no need to make it about you. She didn't say it cruelly. That was the worst part. After we hung up, I sat by the window, letting the light fall in patches across the floor. I remembered other conversations just like that one. Quiet dismissals, gentle redirects. The unspoken rule, don't speak louder than Kelly's presence. I stood and went to the bathroom, faced the mirror. My reflection looked back with no expression, but my eyes were alive, sharp, tired, but awake in a way they hadn't been in years. I picked up my notebook and began a new page. Charity Gala, 2018. My presentation pitch, rejected. Kelly used the phrase word for word in her speech 3 weeks later. Grant for Small Businesses, 2019. My draft emailed to Mom. Kelly announced her plan at family brunch the following Sunday. I didn't need to yell. I needed to write. In the quiet, I heard my own voice for the first time, not trembling, not seeking approval, just mine. That night I found myself thinking about the last time I had tried to assert something, anything. It had been 5 years ago, at a charity dinner. I had offered to speak for a minute about our local food pantry. Kelly had been there too, in a red satin dress, talking to a board member about her new boutique opening. The host handed me the mic. I barely got 3 sentences out before Kelly waved over the same board member and started talking about a donation. I paused, waited. She didn't stop, and under the table my mother's hand squeezed mine. Not for comfort, but as a signal. Stop. This isn't your moment. So I stopped. I handed the mic back, smiled like a good daughter should, but I never spoke again at any family gathering, until now. This time I wasn't going to whisper politely while being erased. I was going to write it down and make them read it. 2 days later I showed up at the gallery. I hadn't RSVP'd. I didn't need to. Years ago I helped secure the funding for the very building the event was held in. Quietly, without a speech or plaque. The architect knew, the city knew. But my name never made it to the donor wall. I parked 2 blocks away, walked slowly under a gray Portland dusk, and stepped into the space like I belonged there, because I did. I didn't wear anything flashy, just a dark, well-fitted blazer, flats, and a sense of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Inside, everything looked curated. Reclaimed wood floors, track lighting angled just right, art that whispered authenticity with a 5-digit price tag. And in the center of it all, Kelly, laughing, glowing, floating between clusters of donors and local influencers, like she owned the air they breathed. I was sipping from a glass of water near the back wall, watching a guest examine a series of abstract pieces, when I heard a low voice beside me. "You're Lorene, right?" I turned. The man was in his 70s, sharp navy suit, eyes like someone who'd signed more checks than contracts. His name tag read, Alvin Graves. "I thought so." He nodded. "You're the one who actually backed the Alder project, that little infill development on Glisson?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He chuckled, not unkindly. "Kelly always talks like it was her baby, but I pulled public records. It's your signature on every equity document. Quiet money, but real money." He clinked his glass against mine gently. "Smart play, by the way. That corner's going to triple in value by 2026. He moved on before I could respond. I stood still. All I could hear was the hum of distant laughter and my pulse in my ears. Someone had seen it, seen me, without me having to scream, or prove, or beg. That moment alone would have been enough. But the universe, or something crueler, wasn't done. Near the bar, I was reaching for a napkin when a woman in a satin blouse and high-heeled boots turned toward me. "So what do you even do, Lorene?" she asked, casual as if we were comparing appetizers. "I mean, you always seem adjacent to things, like around, but not really in it." I looked at her. She wasn't being vicious, just honest, or maybe parroting what she'd been told. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. And then Kelly appeared at her side, draped in soft beige and gold. Not once did her eyes meet mine. She looked right through me and said to the woman, "Oh, Lorene's a free spirit. She does all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff. She's great at supporting." I held the napkin a beat longer than necessary. Right. The woman nodded, sipping her drink. That makes sense? No one asked another question. Later, after people began heading to valet or calling Ubers, I walked out the side door and circled around the building. I didn't want to be seen leaving beside Kelly. I wasn't part of her act. By the time I got home, I was out of breath, but not from walking. I turned on my desk lamp, pulled out my laptop, and logged into the private server where I stored everything, Westwind Assets, a system I built from scratch, without anyone's help or knowledge. I ran my own audits, tracked my own property trails, and just like Alvin had said, Kelly's charities were nothing more than branded facades. Legally, the LLCs belonged to her, but the capital came from my accounts, silent investments, strategic partnerships where she was the face, and I was the risk. I printed 5 pages and laid them out on the dining table like puzzle pieces. Ashcroft Commons, Harborview Green, Alder Project. Each had one common note. Initial funding by L.T. Morgan. My name, my money. She'd taken the credit and left me the liability. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just filed every document into a binder marked, if needed. Let them keep talking. They didn't know the storm was already named. I was just waiting for the wind to shift. I turned off the lamp and walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. From the window, I could still see the glow of the city, the gallery a faint blur in the distance. I'd been erased in plain sight, but strangers were now whispering the truth that my own family had buried for years. And those whispers? They were louder than any speech I never gave. I was heading for the door to get ready for bed when my phone buzzed. A text. From Kelly. Don't get dramatic. Tonight wasn't about you. Try not to repeat history. No greeting, no punctuation. I stared at it for a long moment, and then, as if I were watching a rerun of a very tired show, I remembered the last time she'd used that phrase. I'd brought a guest to a family barbecue, someone I'd been quietly seeing. Kelly had pulled me aside and hissed, "Don't make this a thing. Don't get dramatic." I had laughed it off back then. Now I typed back, "You're right. Tonight wasn't about me, but the next one will be." I didn't wait for a reply. And when I heard her heels later at the valet line, yes, we parked at the same gallery deck, I didn't step aside. She walked past me without pause, then hesitated, turned her head slightly. "Try not to make this a habit, Lorene. You've done enough of that in the past." Her tone was airy, practiced, meant to sting without leaving a visible mark. I didn't flinch, just looked at her and smiled, the kind that doesn't move past the mouth. "I'm just getting started." She walked off. But this time, the silence I held wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The drive home was silent, except for the click of my turn signals. Portland's streets were mostly empty at that hour, and so was I, on the surface. But something had shifted. My thoughts were sharper now, not spinning, focused. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes, poured myself half a glass of wine, and turned on the desk lamp. I pulled out the binder I'd started earlier that week and added a fresh tab, reassignments. It only took 15 minutes to find what I needed. A scanned PDF, property transfer, 6 months old, tied to a mixed-use lot I had personally funded and registered under the Morgan family's development fund, a line item in the shared holdings, or so I'd been told. But the name on the latest deed? West Bay Properties, LLC, managed by Kelly Morgan. No notice, no consent form, and certainly no vote. I double-checked the original agreement from 3 years back. My name was listed as co-founding trustee. Kate's signature was there too, albeit shakier than I remembered. I zoomed in, comparing strokes. The new document showed a nearly identical signature, but the formation date was off by a week, and the notary seal looked digitally pasted. There it was. Either my mother had signed something without understanding it, or Kelly had helped herself to something that didn't belong to her. Again. I leaned back in my chair, closed the laptop, and stared at the ceiling. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. They didn't care about feelings or family brunches or not making things a scene. They just told the truth. I folded the 2 documents and slid them into a plain manila envelope. Not to mail, just to hold. Sometimes evidence needs to breathe a little before it speaks. 2 days later, I showed up to brunch at Kate's house. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. The garden looked the same. perfectly trimmed roses, stone pathway curved like an apology no one ever says aloud. Kelly was already there, in pastel and pearls, pouring mimosas like she ran the place. I walked over to her while she was alone near the peonies. "Got a minute?" I asked. She turned, that polite civil smile already forming. "Of course." I handed her the envelope. She didn't open it. "That's the original ownership doc from the Fremont lot," I said, voice steady. "And the reassignment paperwork you filed 6 months ago." Still no reaction. "I just want to be clear," I continued. "Either you forged Mom's signature, or she signed something she didn't understand. I'm not accusing. I'm pointing out that one of those things happened." Kelly blinked slowly. "Are we really doing this? Here?" "No, you did this. I'm just choosing not to let it rot in silence." She looked away for a second too long, then back. "You always think people are trying to hurt you." I didn't rise to it. "If this isn't reversed by next Friday, I won't be quiet next time. I'll bring the file where it belongs." "Where's that?" she asked, suddenly more clipped. "The county office," I said. "Or the press. Depends who answers first." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked back to the table, smiled at Aunt Doreen, and passed the fruit platter like nothing had happened. That evening, back home again, I went deeper. Old tax documents, archived emails, the family trust files I hadn't touched in years. And there it was. A trust fund, formed under my name, my social, titled Morgan Emergency Holding Account, established 12 years ago, supposedly for mutual family support. The only deposits came from me. The only withdrawals? Kelly. For startup development, travel consulting, health investment. Cute labels for what were essentially lifestyle upgrades. I wasn't just being excluded. I'd been financing the exclusion. I closed every account tied to the trust. The next morning I sent one email. Just one. No lengthy intro. Just a subject line. Correction or disclosure. The attachment was a spreadsheet, clean, simple, color-coded. One tab, line 14, column D. Projected legal exposure, misappropriation of family-held funds. Kelly didn't reply. Kate didn't either. But I didn't need them to. I wasn't trying to win their approval anymore. I was issuing a warning. One they'd understand in their language. Documents, risk, public image. This wasn't about getting back what I'd lost. It was about ending the illusion that they could keep taking without consequence. If they still thought I wouldn't go public, they misunderstood the version of me that walked out of their garden. By midweek, I had gone 3 days without a response. No calls, no emails. Not from Kelly, not from Kate. Silence. The same old strategy. They'd use it like a shield and hope I got tired of shouting into the void. But that morning, while folding laundry with the TV humming in the background, a familiar name pulled me toward the screen. Up next, the anchor smiled, how one Portland entrepreneur is reviving neglected neighborhoods and community spirits with pastries and purpose. I stopped mid-fold, and there she was, Kelly, standing in a bright apron beside a community center kitchen counter, handing out neat rows of baked goods to smiling kids. My strawberry tarragon scones lined the trays, cut precisely in the same shape I always used, a design I had tested, perfected, and shared only in one place, my home kitchen. The segment zoomed in as she placed the last scone into a paper box. "Kelly Hale, founder and project lead," the voiceover announced. The banner below read, "Reviving Portland, one pastry at a time." Not a word about me. I didn't need to hear the rest. I muted the television. Instead of yelling or texting or marching down to the station, I logged in. I had kept my firm's social presence minimal on purpose. Westwind Properties wasn't designed to shout. It was structured to build. But now it was time to raise its voice, not in anger, in facts. The post I drafted was simple. 3 clean slides. Slide 1, a scanned property title, my name bolded, Kelly's absent. Slide 2, the original community redevelopment plan, with my signature at the bottom. Slide 3, a still shot from my kitchen security cam from 2 years ago, time-stamped, showing me baking those scones. Same shape, same glaze. Caption, "Legacy is built, not borrowed." I hit publish. I didn't check the numbers, I didn't monitor shares, I didn't even scroll the comments. But within the hour, an old contact from the planning board messaged me. "Saw your post, about time someone cleared the air." That afternoon the phone rang. Kate. Her voice was clipped. What are you doing? Correcting the record, I said evenly. You're making this ugly. No, I'm making it honest. There was a pause, too long to be accidental. You know how these things work, Lorene. People start digging, and you don't come out clean either. That made me laugh. I didn't spend 10 years hiding my fingerprints from what I built. She did. You'll ruin everything. Everything I didn't build? Let it burn. I ended the call. Later that evening, I drove to a strip mall on the east side. Most people would pass it without a second glance. A laundry shop, a tax office, a nail salon. But tucked in the corner was a tiny storefront with windows still taped from when I first leased it years ago for a pop-up event. It had been the first place I tested my pastries for community distribution. I'd let it go dormant. Until now. I reopened it for one day only. A charity bake sale. Everything priced at whatever people could afford. Proceeds to go directly to a tenant protection fund Kelly once bragged about spearheading. There were no fancy banners, no PR agents, no mimosas, just folding tables, handwritten signs, and the smell of real vanilla and brown butter. The first hour was quiet. Then a few faces trickled in, then more. Near closing, a little girl stood at the counter holding a scone with both hands. These taste like the ones on TV, she said. I smiled. They are, I told her. You just never saw who baked them. A soft round of claps rose from behind her. A few customers nodded. One man slipped a 20 into the donation jar without taking change. It wasn't a crowd, but it was a beginning. And as I locked up, my phone buzzed again. 2 notifications. 1. A repost of my original slides by a local nonprofit, tagging both my firm and Kelly's handle. 2. A message from one of Kelly's key donors. Would love to meet the actual developer behind Ashcroft. Let's talk. They pretended I didn't exist, but now their donors were asking who really did the work. By the following afternoon, the message from Kelly's donor was still sitting unread in my inbox, flagged but unopened. I didn't need to rush. Timing, I'd learned, was everything. That evening, as Portland's skies shifted from gold to pewter, another envelope arrived. Hand-delivered, no return address. Just my name on heavy cream cardstock. The kind Kelly liked to use when she wanted to appear more polished than she actually was. Inside, an invitation to the Ashcroft Renewal ribbon-cutting ceremony. Officially, I wasn't listed as part of the program. Unofficially, they'd already lost control of the guest list. The event was set up in front of one of the newly painted community centers, the same one Kelly had walked through on TV. The sidewalk had been swept, flowers freshly planted. Rows of chairs faced a small stage with a podium and banner, building Portland together. I arrived 10 minutes before it began, dressed in dark gray slacks, a tucked-in blouse, no jewelry. Not because I wanted to blend in, but because I didn't need a spotlight to be seen anymore. Kelly took the stage in a pearl-colored suit, her makeup flawless, her smile tighter than usual. Flashbulbs popped, donors leaned forward, local council members clapped as she began. This project is more than redevelopment, she said smoothly. It's about lifting up areas long overlooked. You can't leave families stuck in places like Alder Street. A few heads turned. A few more chuckled politely. I didn't. Alder Street, where I lived, where I invested, where I had built something when no one else would. Kelly's words weren't random. They were surgical. She wanted the audience to hear low income and think not me. I didn't flinch. But the woman next to me, a staffer from the city housing department, raised an eyebrow. 2 minutes later, a man in a navy vest from a local nonprofit leaned across the back row and whispered to a reporter, handing him a single page. The journalist scanned it, then did a double take. The paper showed the primary equity breakdown for Ashcroft Renewal. Line 1, West Pine Holdings, 76%. Line 2, LLC owner, L. Hale. No mention of Kelly anywhere in the legal filings. The reporter leaned toward his cameraman, who began adjusting his angle. Kelly continued, unaware. We were inspired to create a model that not only renovates, but preserves community identity. Because home isn't just a place, it's people. As she wrapped up, the applause sounded slightly offbeat. The claps weren't synchronized. Something had shifted. Kelly, the reporter called from stage left. Can you clarify the role of West Pine Holdings in this project? Her jaw moved, but only her bottom lip twitched. We've always collaborated with firms aligned in values, she said, blinking twice too quickly. Was your sister one of them? Kelly's head tilted, just barely. Her voice came out warm, practiced. She's always been supportive in her own way. I didn't walk toward the stage. I walked toward the man from the nonprofit. We shook hands. Would you be willing to answer a few questions? He asked quietly. I nodded. Let's step out of the noise. We sat down at a folding table under a canopy just outside the perimeter of the main crowd. A small community blog had sent a contributor. Young, serious, wearing a press badge made on a home printer. I didn't grandstand. I didn't vent. I walked him through the timeline, the filings, the development phases, the partnerships that never got named. I showed copies of permits, my permits. I let him record me saying clearly, I didn't need to be the face, I just wanted to protect the foundation. When he asked if I felt betrayed, I said, I used to think truth would rise on its own, but sometimes you have to put it on paper and hand it to someone. As we wrapped up, the city housing staffer who had sat next to me earlier approached. Smart play, she said. What do you mean? Letting her say it first, she replied. People don't forget who tried to own something that wasn't theirs. By the time I got home, the article had already been posted. Headline: Meet the quiet developer behind Portland's most talked about renewal project. I didn't share it. I didn't need to. Others did. Dozens of reposts. Comments from people I hadn't heard from in years. She's the one who helped my aunt stay in her apartment. I knew it. I saw her working with the survey crew last spring. She doesn't brag. She builds. None of them said my name out loud, but they didn't have to. Kelly wanted the spotlight, but she forgot that the foundation carries the weight. And I built it. I didn't reply to the article. I didn't need to. That night, the repost spoke louder than any caption could, and when the third invitation came, this time from the Ashcroft Renewal Advisory Committee, it wasn't dressed in gold foil edges or followed by polite, hope to see you texts from Kelly. It came through a secure email from the committee's office. Subject line: Agenda Item 3C, Contributor Clarification. Attached was a scanned seating chart for a boardroom downtown. Not a party, not a celebration, a reckoning. I arrived just after 9 a.m. The building's glass facade glared back at me, tall and clinical. Inside, I was directed to the 14th floor, where a long rectangular table faced a projection screen and a tray of untouched pastries. Kelly was already seated at one end, flanked by two donors and a PR rep. Kate sat farther down, in a navy blouse I remembered from a fundraiser 5 years ago, the one she'd asked me not to attend. No one stood when I entered. I didn't expect them to. I nodded once and took the open seat directly across from Kelly. I placed a single leather folder on the table. Then I waited. The chairwoman cleared her throat. We'd like to open this meeting by reviewing the authorship of a recent publication tied to the Ashcroft renewal. Kelly folded her hands. I believe this is just a misunderstanding, she began. I slid the first document out, quietly, no grand gesture, no voice raised. I believe you'll find the misunderstanding was printed in Portland Weekly, under the byline Kelly Hale. The article? Word for word from a draft I submitted to a grant proposal archive 3 years ago. I passed around both papers, one stamped with the Library of Congress copyright filing. The other? A copy of the glossy feature with Kelly's smile taking up the top right corner. The room fell into a stuttered silence. One of the board members coughed into his fist. A legal aide adjusted her glasses. Kelly opened her mouth. I didn't wait. This wasn't about inspiration, I said, calm and precise. It was theft, of authorship, of narrative, of identity. Kate finally spoke softly. Lorene, maybe this isn't the... This is exactly the place, I said, turning toward her. Because every other place, every other table, you've told me it wasn't. My voice didn't rise. If anything, it lowered. I'm not angry she wanted to write something. I'm angry she keeps rewriting who I am. The PR rep whispered something into a phone. I gave them 10 seconds. Then I opened the final flap of the folder and pulled out a contract, not a summary. The actual binding document from the redevelopment purchase, land title, banking logs, wire transfers, LLC filings, all tied to me. I placed it at the center of the table. "This," I said, "isn't a request for credit. It's a return to accuracy." Kelly shifted back, face unreadable. Kate stared at the folder but didn't touch it. One of the younger donors leaned forward. "Is this the same property highlighted in our annual report?" I nodded. "Yes, the numbers check out. I suggest your legal team confirm what your PR team didn't." Another voice piped in from the side of the room, a woman in city planning. "I have a copy of the zoning request here," she said, lifting a paper. "El Hale, March 2020. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't flinch. Kelly tried again. "This wasn't about stealing. We've always shared. Family projects overlap." "Then why was I never included in the credits?" I asked. "Why did the draft I wrote end up with your name on it, published the week after I declined your offer to co-sign your housing bill?" No answer. I stood, calm, still. "This doesn't need to become anything else. You now have the full truth in print and in hand. What you do next reflects on your integrity, not mine." I looked to Kate one last time. "I spent years being told not to embarrass this family, that airing truth would make us look divided." She didn't say a word. So I turned to the board. "But I'm not the one who divided us. I just stopped pretending we weren't." And with that, I slid the folder back into my tote, gave a nod, and walked toward the glass doors. No one stopped me. I didn't leave with an award or a plaque, but for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying any weight that wasn't mine. By the time I got home, I didn't need to check the headlines. My phone had already quieted. No new mentions, no more anonymous calls, just stillness. The week that followed unfolded in near silence. Not the kind used to shame, but the kind that settles over a room once the shouting's done. Kelly hadn't posted since the meeting. Her usual cascade of filtered brunch photos and carefully curated charity smiles went dark. Sponsors began peeling away, one after the other. A quiet statement from one foundation cited, "A reevaluation of public alignment with community values." Another simply thanked her for past partnership. I didn't forward the press releases. I didn't comment. Kate, on the other hand, resigned from the community board she'd chaired for over a decade. No dramatic farewell, no televised announcement, just a formal notice sent to the local chapter. Someone forwarded it to me with a, "Thought you'd want to see this." I didn't reply. That same morning, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat down at my desk, the same one where I'd filed receipts no one had cared to read. But now, the inbox pinged with messages that got my name right on the first try. From nonprofits, from organizers, from city planners who once waved me off. Now they wanted input. They wanted me. I didn't grin or cry. I just answered. 3 days later, just after sunset, I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant, 2 short raps. I almost didn't open it, but I did. Kate stood on my porch, hair pulled back, no lipstick, holding a paper bag. It was the same cloth bakery tote I'd once stitched her initials into during a Christmas market nearly 15 years ago. I'd forgotten she even kept it. "I didn't plan what to say," she murmured. "Then don't," I said, stepping aside. "Just come in." We didn't hug. I didn't offer coffee. She didn't ask. We sat on opposite ends of my small couch, watching the porch light flicker over the backyard fence. The paper bag sat unopened between us. The smell of cinnamon and clove leaked from the top. 10 minutes passed, then 15. When she finally looked at me, it wasn't with tears, just something closer to recognition. "You've always been steadier than I gave you credit for," she said. I nodded. "You never had to say it." She nodded back. That was it. No apology, no makeup dinner, but she came. And for someone like Kate, that meant something. A few weeks later, I hosted a gathering. Not at a gallery or garden. Just in the alley behind the Alder Street complex. There were folding chairs, 2 space heaters, a pot of hot cocoa bubbling on a camp stove. Kids from the building ran around with paper cups of cider. Someone brought tamales wrapped in foil. Someone else, a Bluetooth speaker, playing old soul tracks low enough that conversation still reigned. It wasn't fancy, but it was full. Midway through the evening, a little girl tugged my sleeve. "Is this your house?" she asked, eyes wide. I crouched beside her. "No," I said, smiling. It's all of ours. I just helped hold the door open." She looked at me for a beat, then ran back toward her friends. No fanfare, just acceptance. Later, I walked up to the top floor of the building, the floor that used to have my name on its lease under a shell LLC no one could trace. From that height, I could see the courtyard, the street, the pop-up tables lit by soft yellow bulbs. It was quiet and full. Back in my office, I opened a blank document. Not a speech, not a press kit, a blueprint, a new community fund. This time for women like Miss Daniels in Unit 2B, who'd worked double shifts after her husband got sick. For moms like Kira who needed childcare vouchers to finish night school. For the girl who asked if I owned the building but didn't need to know the answer. I typed the name of the initiative. Then for the first time I typed my own at the bottom, Lorene Hale. Not bolded, not underlined, just present. For once that was enough. I didn't build it for revenge. I built it so no one would have to fight for a seat ever again. Sometimes the loudest victories don't come with applause. They come in the form of silence, finally free of pretending, of shrinking, of asking permission to exist in spaces we already earned. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that legacy isn't about recognition. It's about resilience. It's about choosing to tell your story before someone else writes you out of it. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, told to keep the peace, while others took credit for your work, know this. Your quiet strength holds more power than their noise ever will. And you don't need permission to own your truth. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to reclaim your own story or support someone who did? Let's start a conversation in the comments. Type 1 if this story resonated with you. Or just tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if this story didn't speak to you, I'd still love to know why. Your thoughts matter. If you're still here with me, thank you. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and deeply human, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what's next. We're just getting started.
Hello, I'm Evelyn Ross. My dad called me inutile, that's useless in French, right in front of our clients, thinking I wouldn't understand a word. But I did. Every single word cut deeper than he knew. My family worked hard to erase me from the company legacy, rewriting my work, silencing my voice. They even made up stories to keep me out of meetings I led, pretending I was invisible. But what happens when the useless daughter refuses to stay silent? This isn't just a family feud. It's a fight for identity, for truth, and for the right to finally be seen. What happens when the shadows you live in become the spotlight you command? Stay with me. This story isn't over yet. I stepped into the glass-walled conference room in downtown Chicago at exactly 9:03 a.m., clipboard in hand, and confidence tucked under my tailored blazer. The morning light reflected off the polished concrete floor, making everything feel sharper than usual. I was fully prepared. Client documents lined up like a well-executed symphony. I believed my father Arthur would notice, but I already knew he wouldn't. I'd been working for this French corporate account since Q1, tirelessly coordinating legal agreements, translating notes, crafting presentation visuals. Today, my younger sister Astria, fresh out of a top PR program, was leading. She wore a pristine suit and a practiced smile. The clients, 3 suited French executives, filed in quietly from the lobby. I handed out neatly stacked folders labeled with project milestones. When I looked up, Astria was already giving the opening line in flawless French, and the clients nodded, impressed. My pulse pulsed at a steady hum. I stayed silent, observing every gesture, every glimmer of approval. The room felt tight, like it was holding its breath. My father, leaning casually against the corner of the table, glanced at me. He caught my eye, offered a small nod, like a dismissive parent signaling an obedient child. I swallowed a surge of bitterness. Then came the moment I'd feared. As I handed the last folder to a client, my father interjected in French, Elle est inutile, mais elle est bonne pour les copies. The translation slipped past his lips, as though he spat a casual insult. She's useless, but good for making copies. A polite chuckle rippled from the table. But in that polished boardroom, it felt like thunder inside me. My hand froze mid-present. I understood every word. I understood the humiliation. I was a daughter of two cultures, fluent in French because of my mother's rich accent, memories from Paris. My throat tightened. A memory flickered of my mom whispering hope in my ear. Tu n'es jamais inutile. Tu es une étoile. You are never useless. You are a star. Let the clients laugh. Let my father pretend I couldn't understand. I would not dignify it with a response. I swallowed the hurt into the hollow of my chest and nodded. Professionalism wasn't weakness. I closed the folder, turned to face the clients again, and continued to walk them through the presentation timeline, carefully masking the storm behind my calm facade. Across the table, I caught one client's eye. He gave me a subtle acknowledgement. He saw. I felt the weight of recognition. My sister smiled smugly beside me, basking in attention. My father looked satisfied. In his world, this was a display of control. But I heard the crack in his tone. By the time I stepped out of the room, cool air hit my face. I paced the corridor until quiet hush returned. I pulled out my phone, found an old voice message from my mother. My thumb hovered over play. My heart braced. Tu n'es jamais inutile. Tu es une étoile. Mom's voice, soft, unwavering. My body shook, but only from a gathering of energy, certainty rising within me. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaled deep. No tears, just a sharp clarity. I tucked the phone away. This wasn't just another insult rolling off an entitled man's tongue. It was a bell signaling a movement in me, a shift. I would prove him wrong, but on my terms. My mind began ticking. Gather proof, reclaim credit, expose truth. I squared my shoulders, stepped into the elevator. Doors whooshed shut. Paris and Chicago seemed walls apart, but the memory of my mother's faith bridged them both. I walked out into the lobby, head high, with one goal. I would not stay invisible. When the elevator doors opened onto my floor, I felt the air shift. It was heavier, more deliberate. I walked toward my shared office corner, an open-plan workspace with frosted dividers and a faint hum of keyboards at midday. My assistant, Mark, ducked his head in when I passed by. He'd seen the look on my face. I acknowledged him with a brief nod, not ready to speak, still reeling from what had just happened. I slid into my chair and stared at my inbox. On top sat a meeting invite. Legacy briefing, core family assets. My name was nowhere to be found. I double-checked every list, attendee list, agenda, nothing. It was like someone closed a door without a sound. My silence from that morning still reverberated, but now it felt louder than any retort I could have made. I exhaled, scanning the email for clues. No justification, no apology, just a decision made. Without me. For so long, I'd believed that silent competence would win respect. But it didn't. My competence was invisible. The corner of my screen flashed a meeting already underway. I clicked on it and minimized the window, the live video showing my father standing at a podium in the executive conference room, streamed company-wide. I kept it in the background, like a wounded animal refusing to look. You occasionally hear talk of future-proofing, Arthur began, voice smooth, rehearsed. To stay relevant, we need new leadership. Today, I'm proud to introduce Astria as creative lead for the next generation. My breath caught. I leaned in. He was smiling, shining like he'd won something. The screen flashed to Astria, radiant and poised. Behind her was a branded slide with her name in bold. His words echoed. Her modern vision and brand instincts will guide us forward. And just like that, my work, my pitch for the Paris expansion, my voice, was erased. I clenched both fists under my desk. Those campaign ideas, my digital strategy, my analysis, they were being described as her brilliance. I felt the sting not just of betrayal, but of erasure. Later, I drifted toward the staff cafeteria, letting a half-empty cup of coffee go cold. Astria spotted me and sauntered over, holding her own lattes like trophies. "Big sis," she said with efforted warmth. "You know, you were always more classic." Dad needs someone with sparkle now. Classic. Useless. Copies. My chest tightened so hard I thought I couldn't breathe. She placed her hand on my shoulder, as if consoling. The movement made my skin crawl. I laughed, low and steady. Yeah? Well, that Paris pitch you just got credit for. It was mine last quarter. Her brow arched. Oh, I thought that was your assistant's work. She paused. Cute story. I stared. A junior designer hovering nearby looked at me uncertainly. He whispered, "Weren't you the one who pitched that?" The words hung in the air, an echo. I paused and then said evenly, "Apparently, I was just taking notes." The designer backed away. Astria smiled again, but it wasn't warm. It was predatory. She left, her footsteps echoing through the cafeteria. I watched her go, feeling the space contract around me. I realized this wasn't just about credit. It was a calculated takeover. By the time I returned to my desk, I felt hollow and sharper. I opened my digital folder, Family Pitch 2023, and hesitated. The cursor hovered. Then I deleted it, not in anger, but in purpose. Then a blank document popped up. In the file name bar, I typed, "Rebuild, not for them, not for Astria, not for my father, for me." My fingertips tapped the first sentence before I even realized it. They think I'm dispensable. They're about to find out how wrong they are. My heart hammered, not out of fear, but resolve. Abruptly, Mark peeked in. "You okay?" I looked up and met his eyes. "This is the beginning," I said. He blinked, surprised, but nodded. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the cafeteria noise, and dove into work. I sketched out an outline, compile all my past proposals, collect emails where I led initiatives, prepare to show them concrete proof. Keep quiet, gather strength, then strike. Later that day, I slipped into the empty conference room. It was late afternoon. Sunlight painted the long table. I drafted bullet points. Paris Vision Origination, Q1 strategy documents, email threads showing leadership direction, draft social media plans under Evelyn Hayes's name. My brain moved faster than ever, fueled by the morning's insult. When I finally left the room, dusk sliding onto the windows, I paused and looked back. That empty space now held potential. Tonight, I would chase down my attorney friend, Michaela. Tomorrow, I'd dig through old servers. But first, I needed rest. I walked past the front desk, sliding out of the office into crisp Chicago evening. I took a deep breath. The world didn't yet know the forces I was marshaling, but they would. The city was still dark when I tapped the power button on my laptop. A pale glow lit my living room, and I felt acutely aware of the silence around me. No chatter from Mark, no footfall in the corridor. Just me, alone with a fresh sense of purpose. I opened the company's internal drive and began scrolling through the campaign folder I'd worked on so hard. Her name, Astria, was stamped across the top of every document. I stopped at one pitch deck. Identical visuals, identical slide structure, identical captions. The metadata showed it was originally mine, but overwritten 2 days ago. My hands shook, and I pressed Save As, then transferred a complete copy into an encrypted folder titled Exhibit A, Ownership. I leaned back, my breath shallow. Shock and betrayal churned. But there was also clarity. This wasn't incidental. It was a theft. I shut the lid on my laptop and noticed the clock. 6:45 a.m. I needed facts. I dressed quickly, skipping coffee, and made my way to the office. The cold morning air hit me harder than before, but every inhale steadied me. Inside, I bypassed the receptionist and headed straight to Arthur's office. It was later than usual, late morning, but he was already there, leaning over his mahogany desk. He looked up, expression cool. "I'd like my name restored on the Paris deck," I said, voice even. I stood tall despite the tension brewing inside. He flicked through some papers. "Evelyn, you contributed, sure, but Astria executed it. You were assisting, not leading." His words hit like ice. I led the entire strategy, I countered. Every concept, every page, I drafted it. He adjusted his tie, eyes distant. You were just helping, he said lightly. It's business. My jaw tightened. This was more than credit. This was erasing me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I closed my laptop, chest tight, and nodded. Understood. I left before there was more to say. His office door closed behind me like a sentence. Outside, a clerk passed by, her recognition fleeting but sympathetic. I didn't let it register. Instead, I walked to a quiet park bench across the street, autumn wind rustling around me. I retrieved a leather notebook from my bag and wrote, "Truth doesn't need credit, but betrayal reveals legacy games." The pen wanted to scratch through the words, but I let it glide. I thought of my mother, her humor, her warmth, how she always reminded me I had talent. And for the first time, I understood. I'd spent my life being help, never the one writing the story. Always the ghost. I closed the notebook and stood, eyes on the skyscrapers behind the glass facades. Another jogger circled the path, oblivious. It reminded me, life goes on. I would do more than cling to what was taken. I'd take control. Back in my car, I drafted an encrypted email to myself with the campaign files intact. Subject: Exhibit A, Ownership. I added a few lines in the body. This is proof, not just for them, for me. Driving home at dusk, the skyline shimmered as streetlights came on. My mind reeled with plans. Reach out to Michaela tomorrow. Press through legal channels. Spotlight the truth. But right now, there was something I had to accept. The game had changed. They thought I'd stay silent. They thought I'd let them rewrite my story. Game on. When I stepped into the near-empty office that late evening, the soft hum of fluorescent lights greeted me. My heels clicked as I walked past colleagues packing up for the day. I carried a worn leather folder, the one containing Exhibit A, pressed close to my chest. Every echo down that corridor felt like affirmation. I was no longer staying invisible. I slid into my cubicle, heart steady. Around me, screens glowed with idle screensavers. I opened our CRM platform and navigated to the finalized contracts section. Fingers trembling slightly, I searched for my name. It didn't appear, not once. Every major campaign I'd spearheaded, Paris launch, Q2 social rollout, strategic rebranding, listed Astria or the nebulous brand vision team. Not a single mention of me as project lead. I scrolled through email chains, the back and forth planning, the approvals, the midnight revisions. My name was there, drafting, guiding, leading, but in the official record, invisible. I closed the tab and rubbed my temples. A hollowness spread through me. Betrayal turned worst when it became systemic. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate erasure. Later that week, I found myself in a luxury hotel's private dining suite, an elegant setting for a key client dinner. The room had soft amber lighting, the table set with polished silver, walls draped in cream fabric. I wore a dark sheath dress, heels carefully chosen to make me feel poised, not loud. Arthur sat at the head, Astria to his right. Across from us, French and U.S. stakeholders chatted quietly. When introductions began, Arthur nodded toward Astria. Astria Hayes, the mind behind this campaign. Soft applause followed. My pulse sped up. I spoke next, preparing to outline deliverables. I could feel the clients watching, waiting. Then Arthur cut in. And Evelyn, logistical support. The words landed. Cold dismissal. A knot tightened in my throat. I took a breath and began. I spoke in French when a French client asked a technical question, perfectly fluent. But Arthur interrupted, directing his gaze toward Astria. She'll handle that. The clients exchanged glances, puzzled. One of them subtly tilted his head, clearly expecting me to continue. But I didn't. I held back. Silence became my answer. Back in the hallway, minutes later, I cornered Arthur. Was that a mission calculated or just habit? I asked evenly. He brushed past me, cool as ever. Don't make this about you. Clients demand clarity. Clarity or control? I pressed. He didn't stop. He didn't even look back. My elbow brushed the wall, solid and unyielding beneath my fingertips. I inhaled slowly, steadying the flush in my cheeks. Dad had turned a vulnerable matter into spectacle and stripped me down in front of clients. It wasn't a mistake. It was power play. As I walked back into the suite, I caught my reflection in a tall mirror near the entry. Half of my face was shadowed. The other half caught the warm glow of the chandelier. I paused, studying that division. Invisible here, but irrevocably present elsewhere. In a quiet voice, I whispered, "If they won't see me, I'll make sure they can't ignore me." I gathered the company pad and pen off the table and slipped out, leaving murmurs behind. I passed the headwaiter collecting cutlery, bowed politely, and left with my mind racing. That night, I didn't go home. I returned to the office and stood before the copier. I fed in copies of contracts, email threads, pitch decks, every proof of authorship, pages Word stacked, each one a testament. By 10 p.m., the printer was silent, paper piled high. Exhibit A was no longer just digital. It was physical, tangible. Freezing air seeped in through the vents. I exhaled, hand hovering over the stack. This was more than vindication. It was declaration. I knew tomorrow would bring confrontation, disruption. But tonight, I had concrete ground underneath my feet. I left the office after midnight, stepping into the empty parking garage. The echo of my heels sounded loud in the silence. Exhibit A rested in my bag. And though the game had changed before, tonight it shifted irrevocably. Tomorrow would be different. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the hum of the city pressing through my windows and the weight of Exhibit A stacked neatly on my kitchen table. My phone lit up with the 6:30 alarm, but I'd been awake long before that. By 8 a.m., I stood at the base of the office tower, coffee in hand, coat buttoned to my collarbone. It was brisk, typical Chicago spring chill, but I didn't feel it. I felt sharpened. I entered the building, badge scanned, and stepped into the elevator just as Astria rushed in behind me. She barely acknowledged me as she fixed her silk scarf in the mirrored walls. Her reflection met mine with that usual glint, mischief wrapped in entitlement. Then, casually, she said in French, "Elle pense encore qu'elle compte ici. C'est adorable." She still thinks she matters here. That's cute. I let the silence hold for a moment. I didn't blink, didn't shift. Then, as the elevator chimed and she moved to step out, I replied in French, soft but precise. Only cowards whisper when they're unsure who's listening. She froze. Just a second. But I saw it, the twitch in her jaw. Then she left, not looking back. I stepped out a floor later, heading toward the boardroom for that morning's prep. As I passed through the hallway, I caught a hushed conversation near the glass divider. "She's smart," Callista was saying to one of the junior designers. "But she's just a shadow. Astria always outshines her." They didn't see me, or maybe they didn't care. I paused for only a breath, then kept walking. I didn't confront them. I didn't flinch. I just walked straight into the boardroom and took the lead chair, Arthur's usual spot. One of the senior associates raised an eyebrow. No one said anything. I opened my laptop, connected to the monitor, and pulled up the digital campaign dashboard. Metrics, engagement rates, target reach, all charts with my fingerprints all over them. "Let's begin," I said, voice calm, confident. Heads turned. The room settled. I outlined the strategy, referencing shifts in consumer behavior, tying our creative to analytics that only I had tracked. The presentation was precise, compelling, no theatrics, just facts, results, truth. Midway through, the door opened. Astria entered, half laughing with her phone in hand, until she saw me standing there. Her smile faltered. "You're welcome to join," I said, still looking at the screen. "But today, I speak first." She stood at the doorway for a second, then took a chair near the back. Didn't interrupt once. When the presentation ended, there was a pause. The kind that only happens when expectations get upended. A few staff clapped softly. I didn't need more. As I gathered my things, Arthur walked by, briefcase in hand, jaw clenched. He stopped just long enough to say, "Don't get too comfortable." I met his gaze and replied, "Steady. That's the point. I'm done being comfortable in silence." I left the boardroom and walked through the corridors with a slow, deliberate pace. Faces turned. No one dared speak. Back at my desk, I didn't sit. I pulled open the bottom drawer and lifted out the key to my personal cabinet, a small, nondescript file cabinet I'd kept mostly empty. Until now. That night, instead of going straight home, I stayed. The cleaning crew moved around me like I wasn't there. Just another shadow on the floor. But I wasn't a shadow, not anymore. I began filing physical copies, Exhibit A, emails printed in sequence, strategy notes, handwritten edits, meeting memos I'd signed, each labeled, each protected. I was building something separate now, a record, a vault, a legacy. If they thought this was about a title, a meeting, or a campaign, they still didn't understand. This wasn't revenge, this was reclamation. The following morning, I returned to my apartment just before sunrise. The sky outside my window bled from indigo to pale gray. I stood at my desk, not even taking off my coat, and opened the encrypted folder I had created the night before. I added the new files, the physical, the digital, the undeniable. Then I renamed the folder, Contingency Files. I clicked save. My laptop hummed softly, like it understood the shift that had taken root inside me. I took out a small box I'd picked up online, still in its packaging, and unwrapped the sleek pen tucked inside. It looked ordinary, but when I clicked it, a tiny red dot blinked. Audio, encrypted. Legal in Illinois. Discreet. Enough. They wanted silence. I'd give them playback. That afternoon, during an informal executive huddle, I slid the pen into the inner pocket of my blazer. No one noticed. Not Arthur, who stood near the window, pretending to reflect on quarterly trends. Not Astria, who sat back in her chair with her shoes half off, swirling her tea like royalty. "Restructuring will help us streamline," Arthur said, his tone flat, unreadable. "We've got too many overlapping voices," Astria added with a grin. "It's time to cut the fat, especially in international campaigns. We need sparkle, not spreadsheets." The room chuckled. I nodded, kept my hands folded in my lap. The pen blinked once. Later that night, back in my apartment, I reviewed the audio. Every word, every tone, labeled and backed up. 2 days later, minutes before the global Zoom meeting for Project Sierra, the campaign I had conceived, pitched, and nurtured, I received a Slack ping from HR. Simple, efficient, cold. "Due to realignment, you will not be presenting today. Astria will lead." An email followed. Subject: Project Sierra, Leadership Shift. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I closed the window without responding, left the Zoom before it began. My hand hovered over the trackpad, trembling slightly, but not from fear, from decision. I tapped twice on the encrypted folder. Then I walked to the kitchen, made tea, sat down, and opened the recorder. One clip stood out. I played it. Arthur's voice, clipped and low. "She can't lead globally. She's not marketable enough." The words sliced, but I didn't flinch. I pressed pause. Let the silence settle around me. Then I whispered aloud, to no one in particular, "Neither are your secrets." That night, I stayed up reviewing campaign files, tracing metadata trails, organizing emails, stacking screenshots into a chronological storm. Each document was a match, each clip a fuse. I wasn't rushing anymore. I wasn't shouting. I was collecting the truth, piece by deliberate piece. When I finally crawled into bed, the sky outside had gone dark again. My last thought before drifting into a restless sleep wasn't of vengeance or hurt. It was clarity. They had built an empire on erasure, but I had kept every receipt. By Monday, the air was crisp, sharper than it should have been for late April. I arrived at the office before the sun had fully risen, the world still cloaked in that pre-dawn blue. My steps echoed across the marble lobby, familiar but heavier, as if each one carried something irreversible. I took the elevator up alone. As the doors closed and the floor numbers blinked past, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. There I was, eyes lined with sleepless hours, jaw set firm, not a hair out of place, not a thought out of order. Then, like a snapped rubber band, the flashback came. That dinner in Paris, 2 years ago. A room full of clients. Laughter, wine. And Arthur leaned back with his usual faux charm, turning to one of the French executives with a chuckle and tossing his hand toward me as if I were invisible. "Inutile," he said. "Just a presence. Decorative." The man laughed awkwardly, unsure if it was a joke. But Arthur smiled, raised his glass, and never looked at me again that night. Back in the elevator, the word looped inside my skull. Inutile, 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 until I leaned forward, palms flat against the mirror, and said clearly to my own reflection, I was never useless. I was just misused. The next few days blurred through meetings, forced smiles, and silence packed like snow beneath boots. By Friday, I hadn't confronted Arthur. I hadn't exposed Astria, but the tremors underneath their empire had begun. At noon, I found myself alone in the break room, nursing a bitter coffee that tasted more like burnt memory than caffeine. Seraphine walked in quietly, poured herself a decaf, and sat across from me without asking. She didn't speak right away, just watched me. Finally, she leaned forward and said softly, "Why do you let them treat you like this?" I blinked, not out of confusion, but because I'd never heard anyone here call it what it was. I answered without pause. Because I thought they were family. Turns out, they're just shareholders. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small silver flash drive, slid it across the table. "Check the media relations folder," she said. "You'll want to see what was sent to Forbes last week." I looked at her, heart hitching a beat. "Why are you doing this?" She shrugged. "Because silence only helps the wrong people win." That Sunday night, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor with my laptop open and the flash drive plugged in. The files were clean, too clean. Press releases tailored to rewrite reality. Articles doctored by Astria's team, reshaping the narrative to place her at the center of campaigns I'd built from the ground up. My name didn't appear once. Even the quote I'd given at last quarter's PR launch was attributed to a senior consultant. I closed my eyes, then reached for a yellow legal pad. On the first page, I drew a tree. The trunk I labeled Truth. Its roots, emails, designs, recordings. Each branch carried the name of a campaign. Lumiere, Cascade, Vita Reach. Each leaf, one moment they'd tried to erase. Then I circled the tree and wrote, "War isn't always declared. Sometimes it's published." Before I shut the laptop, I placed the flash drive into a padded envelope. I wrote in block letters across the front, "In case of silence." Then I sealed it, pressed the edges tight, and placed it inside my office tote. I picked up my phone and texted Seraphine. "Next round's on me, but it won't be coffee." The padded door clicks shut behind me, and I place the envelope, "In case of silence," onto the desk with deliberate care. Light filters through the blinds, dust motes drifting like thoughts in my apartment-turned-war room. My heart pulses with a steady resolve. Tonight, I begin rewriting the narrative. I clear stacks of documents and photo prints across the table. The clock reads 2 a.m., but my mind races with every campaign I led. I open folders labeled Lumiere, Cascade, Vita Reach, my fingerprints stamped on every page, every pixel, every strategy outline. I pull up the first draft of the Lumiere pitch from my hard drive. There it is. My original opening line, my mood board details, invention of the hashtag that went viral. I highlight sections Astria claimed as hers in internal presentations. I recreate my folders. Proof set A, untouched. Proof set B, chain of emails. Proof set C, original video scripts. I label each margin in red ink. Ownership verified. It's peaceful, almost clinical, as I work through file after file, marking my trail. Evidence becomes architecture, memory becomes structure. I flash back to our early brainstorming sessions at the loft near Lincoln Park, sipping strong coffee late into winter nights, my excitement naive but glorious. Those nights birthed VitaReach, my concept to tie wellness brands to heartwarming family stories. That original pitch deck sits here with my name still intact. Tonight, I make sure it stays that way. By dawn, I've recreated every campaign's original backbone. Daylight filters into my living room, and I lean back, shoulders heavy with accomplishment. The small recording pen Seraphine helped me plant has 40 hours of incriminating audio. The printouts weigh like iron in my hands. They thought they could bury me. Now I've resurrected everything. Later that Sunday at lunch, a ping on my phone from Seraphine. Check the creative post, page 2. My finger trembles as I open the link. There it is on my screen. Meet Astria, the young visionary redefining legacy brands. The headline screams betrayal. Below, a glossy photo of Astria gazing into the camera, while Arthur's quote rings out, "She's the reason we're global now." Not a single acknowledgement of the teams behind those campaigns, much less me. A sting, but nothing I hadn't anticipated. I close the article, jaw clenched. Betrayal has a taste. Bitter steel. But I lift my phone instead of succumbing. I start uploading my folders to a secure Dropbox folder marked for investors, authorship evidence. Then I draft an email. Subject, clarification, campaign authorship, evidence attached. Recipient, Global Investor Network. My cursor hovers over send. I do not press it, not yet. Tension coils around me like a wire waiting to be tripped. My breath steadies. Evening comes. I stand before the full-length mirror in my bedroom, red cosmetics in hand. Face tired, but eyes fierce. Carefully, I write across the glass. They made the monster, now they'll meet her. Seeing that phrase across the reflection shifts me further. No longer Evelyn the helper, but Evelyn the reckoner. No longer silent. Tomorrow is Monday. My wardrobe chosen. A tailored cream blazer, black slacks. Visible, professional. I place the sealed session of truth in my tote, slink the lipstick-hidden pen into my pocket, and hold the phone with the untouched email ready. In the dark of my hallway bedroom, I glance back at the mirror one last time. Evelyn meets Evelyn. The room hums with expectation. The next morning, the boardroom will be her battlefield. The mirror may have cracked, but I walk from its shards whole. The padded door clicks shut behind me, sealing Sunday night's reckoning. Morning tiptoes into the city, quiet, purposeful. I lift my tote, containing the email draft and flash drive, then step into my car. The office tower reflects dawn in its glass, but I feel like I'm walking into a trial. Scene 1. The fracture at the meeting, Monday, 9 a.m. The boardroom is half filled, international faces in front of laptops. A video call with European partners flickers onto the screen. Monsieur Delacour appears, clean suit, polite smile. Arthur starts with pleasantries, then dives into campaign metrics. Astria clicks through slides, nice visuals, smooth delivery. No mention of me. Then Delacour leans forward on screen and asks in French, "Et la dame aux idées? Elle n'est plus là? And the lady with the ideas, is she no longer with you?" Silence. Arthur's face tightens. He stammers something about restructuring. Astria fumbles in English, shifting focus. I am on mute, frozen, watching a crack deepen. I snap a screenshot. That question is a fracture. Proof the world noticed. That's all I need. Scene 2. The erased event, later. Evening at the company auditorium. It's packed. Investors, media, staff. Callista strides on stage under warm lights, microphone in hand. "Tonight, we celebrate Astria's solo brilliance," she says, voice soaring. Behind her, the campaign imagery I created, taglines, visuals, rotate on a giant screen. The crowd applauds. I sit at the back, nearly invisible. A reporter edges toward Arthur afterward. "What about Evelyn?" they ask. He smiles thinly. "Supportive, but no creative direction. Not a lie, but not the full truth." My chest tightens, but I breathe steady. Scene 3. Quiet retaliation begins. I drive home as night falls. My apartment is still, except for the glow of the city. Seraphine calls. "They're curious," she says. "We didn't offer comment, but the media is asking." I say, "Let them wonder for one more day." I upload the Genesis deck, original creation timeline, Evelyn Ross, from the flash drive. It's small, but explosive. I email it to a few industry insiders, one lead investor, a prominent columnist, a veteran journalist. I write, "Timeline verification. I led these campaigns. Open for clarification." Then I close the lid. I don't need to watch the notifications light up. Ending cliffhanger. That night, media feeds ping. A buzz. Multiple sources claim credit misrepresentation. I glance at my screen. Then I close it and let the quiet fill me. My voice in my head. Next time, I won't need a seat. I'll own the stage. I step into Friday morning with intent. This time, I'm the one breaking the silence. My crimson blazer feels like armor as I walk the quiet hallway before dawn, slipping into my apartment office to draft an email. Subject: Original intellectual property, attached for transparency. I attach the full campaign files, drafts, mood boards, email timestamps, everything. No flourish, no grandstanding, only a straight presentation of facts. I hit send, and the click echoes louder in my chest than any applause. I take a deep breath, tuck the evidence away, and drive to the office, letting daylight fill the uncertainty. Arriving at work, I sense the shift. The elevator ride is hushed. People's eyes flick to the red. I share a glance with Seraphine in the lobby. Her steady nod confirms it's happening. Upstairs in the boardroom, tablets charge and screens blink awake. A live call is scheduled with our French investors, including Monsieur Delacour. Arthur opens the meeting, ready to lead. Astria smiles at me over the table, but I hold my place. Half standing, a silent signal that today I move differently. The video screen fills with Delacour's polite greeting in French. Things seem the same, until he leans forward. "Before we proceed," he says in perfect French, "I must ask, who created the Genesis branding?" All eyes swivel. Arthur falters, his eyebrows hiking. Astria flushes. The pause stretches. I lower my shoulders, unmute myself, and answer in the same language. "C'était moi. J'ai construit chaque mot, chaque image." It lands like a gavel. The confidence in my voice isn't brash. It's measured, undeniable. In that pause, I feel the boardroom shift. Their posture straightens, formulas rewriting. Arthur lifts his hand. I catch the moment before he speaks, his face unsettled, his script broken. Seraphine leans toward him, whispering, "You didn't know she lived in Paris?" The boardroom hums, my presence now undeniable. I meet Delacour's gaze with calm certainty. While the team was highlighting surface appeal, I was studying visual linguistics in Montmartre, blending technique with nuance. I didn't rely on titles, I epitomized them. No one interrupts, no applause, but I see the recalibration, the balance shifting. Astria's tightening smile, Arthur's slack jaw. Evidence. Later, the call ends with Delacour's final words, still echoing. "We look forward to working with you, Mademoiselle Ross." I close my folder, look around, then whisper, "Let's begin again. Honestly this time." Arthur glances at me as he exits. His look isn't anger. It's surprise, the kind that preludes realignment. The hallway feels different on my way out. Colleagues avoid eye contact, Some offer hesitant smiles. It's a small stage, but it feels vast. The door to the conference room felt heavier than usual as I stepped inside. The room was sterile, neutral, no familiar decor to soften the sharp edges of corporate tension. Today wasn't about pleasantries. It was about facts, proof, justice. I placed the thick binder on the table before the assembled stakeholders, legal advisors, and of course, Arthur. Seraphine sat quietly beside me, her presence a silent pillar of support. I glanced around the room, noting the shifting expressions: curiosity, unease, impatience. Proof of ownership, I began calmly, voice steady. Concept drafts, email threads, time-stamped revisions, every piece documenting the journey from inception to execution. Everything. Hands reached for the binder, flipping pages, scanning documents. The air thickened with unspoken tension. Arthur's gaze flicked over the papers. His confident mask faltered. "This," he said, attempting to dismiss, "is nothing more than a family disagreement." Seraphine slid a sealed envelope across the table, a signed non-disclosure agreement, and an audio file with a time-stamped recording of Arthur's own words. I locked eyes with Arthur. "This isn't personal anymore. It's legal." The room went quiet, the weight of truth settling in like a slow tide. Outside, headlines erupted like wildfire. Ross scandal, misattribution allegations surface. Who really created Genesis? Emails from clients and investors flooded inboxes, messages placing partnerships on hold pending legal resolution. The house of cards trembled. Meanwhile, Arthur sat in his home office, the glow of his laptop casting shadows on a face etched with regret. A call from Astria blinked unanswered. She knew better than to disturb this fragile moment. He scrolled through online backlash, comments piling like stones on a sinking ship. His mind replayed my voice, steady and cold in his ear. "I only appeared useless because you refused to see me." I walked out of the courthouse steps under a low sun, my shadow stretching long and proud behind me. The battle was won, not for him, but for myself. I didn't win to prove anything to him, I whispered into the cooling air. I won to stop proving anything to myself. The legal storm was over, but the road to healing had only just begun. Some wounds don't show in courtrooms. They live quietly beneath the skin. The morning light spilled softly through the tall windows of the Paris boardroom by the Seine, casting warm patterns on the polished wood table. It was an oddly serene setting for a moment that would change everything. Monsieur Delacour sat at the head of the table, flanked by two major investors whose reputations alone could sway markets and reshape futures. I sat opposite them, steady but alert, knowing this was the culmination of years of invisibility and whispered doubts. Delacour reached across and slid a thick contract toward me. His eyes held that rare mixture of respect and sincerity. "Mademoiselle Ross, we insist you lead this project yourself, not them." One of the investors nodded, adding, "We've heard the truth, and we trust the star, not the stagehand." The words settled around me like a cloak. Years of being sidelined, erased, and underestimated suddenly distilled into this simple, powerful validation. I responded in fluent French, my voice calm but proud. "Merci beaucoup. C'est un honneur." "Thank you very much." "It is an honor." The gravity of that moment wasn't lost on me. It wasn't just about winning contracts or recognition. It was about reclaiming my own worth, my own voice. Later that day, back at the company headquarters, I sat across from Arthur in my office for what I knew would be our last conversation. "I built your legacy," I told him evenly, "but it cost mine. I'm going to build mine now." Arthur's usual smirk faltered. He was speechless. Seraphine watched quietly, her eyes reflecting respect, without a word spoken. I reached into my bag and placed a crisp, single-page resignation letter on his desk. The words typed plainly on the front page. I was only useless while I believed in him. The weight of those words hung in the air. This was no angry farewell. It was a quiet, powerful closure. I wasn't burning bridges. I was choosing a new path. Weeks later, in the calm of my new home office, sunlight streamed in over Parisian art and a few cherished photographs, including one of my mother and me. It was a reminder of the star I was always meant to be and the legacy I was ready to write on my own terms. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote across the top. Chapter 1. Evelyn Ross Creative. I turned on the camera for my new vlog, a project born from both necessity and hope. If you've ever been called useless, I said softly, looking directly into the lens, know this. You only are if you decide to stay still. Move, speak, own your story. The camera pulled back as I began typing my first design brief for my consultancy. The morning light caught my face, a promise and a beginning. My father once called me useless. He didn't realize he was choosing the person I'd become.